Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Carolesson, with my co-host, Karen Christine Patrick. And today we have 2 guests. The first guest is Gordon Asher Davidson, and we'll take a break and we'll bring on Colleen Mauro. We'll tell you about her at the top of the second hour. But in the first hour, we want to talk about Gordon Asher Davidson, who has had a long career of active leadership in social change institutions and movements, while simultaneously pursuing a deep inner meditative life, culminating in his book, The Transfiguration of Our World, How a Light Alliance is Transforming Darkness and Creating a New Earth. His experience includes co-authoring with his wife, Corinne McLaughlin, The Practical Visionary in Spiritual Politics, with a foreword by the Dalai Lama, co-founding Sirius, a spiritual environmental community, serving as founding director of the Social Investment Forum, founding and co-directing in Washington, D.C. Institute, the Center for Visionary Leadership, and offering many clients worldwide deep spiritual guidance and transformational consulting for over 20 years. Wow. I know there's a lot more about Gordon on our website at aquarianradio.com. And before we bring on Gordon, I want to say hi to Karen. Aloha, Karen.
Hello.
Are you there? Hello.
I am here and very much looking forward to this presentation. I love it when people really get into the leadership levels, what's real leadership in these changing and transformative times. So this sounds really like a winner.
I am too. So let me get Gordon's. Yeah, we go. Here we go. Hi, Gordon.
Hello.
Welcome to
the
show.
Yes, hello. Well, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Well, we're really blessed to have you. Thank you for coming. And we want to kind of just wind you up and let you go and you tell your story and your theory and your whole concept. And then periodically we're going to kind of like raise our invisible hands and ask you questions. So take it away, Gordon. Tell us about your work.
Sure. Well, thank you. Yes, I think it's always good to share what is the source of the information that I'm offering to people to consider because, you know, it is some of it's quite unusual and different from what other people are saying. So, as you mentioned, I've been an activist in spiritual politics and financial world for many, many years. And I went through a very deep experience about 20 years ago where after our house was burned to the ground by an arsonist, and we lost everything. And in that process, I was very upset, as you can imagine, and I had to go through a very deep process of realizing that the problem was my too much self-will, wanting to do everything my way and my timing, and that wasn't really serving as much as I could. So I went through a process of ultimately surrendering my personal will to the higher will and really meaning it and really going through this very intense process inwardly. At that point, I had this tremendous contact and opening to a spiritual master on the inner planes who is very, very much in a leadership role in terms of what's happening on the planet, how it's all unfolding, and helping to guide it with many other higher beings. And so I've been in dialogue and telepathic communication with this being for the last 20 years. And I have a tremendous amount of information and insight and conversations with him every day about what's going on in the world and why it is the way it is and where is it all going. So that's my qualification for offering this information. Of course, I tell everyone that you should take this information and evaluate it on based on your own intuition and your own soul sense of things, and not necessarily anything accepting what I say because I happen to say it. It's really got to make sense to you. So that's the way I like to present it to people. So
wow. Well, yeah, I just had a quick comment. It's very interesting about we all have our guides, and some people are aware of them and some people are not. And I know
right.
Karen and I have both had contact with our guides, and so I'm very interested in what your guide is telling you and how that works for you. Yeah. Tell us more. Thank you.
Yes. Well, after I opened this contact, I went through a very intensive training, actually for 5 years, of how you work with this process, and so that you can make the contact as clear and accurate as possible with minimizing distortions and inserting things and all kinds of other ways that it can become unclear. And so I've been working with this now for 20 years, so I feel quite confident that what I am receiving is definitely what the Master is trying to communicating, and it's not anything added or colored by my own, for the most part, generally speaking. So now I can have a telepathic communication anytime I choose, and he's always there and willing to communicate, and we have dialogue. It's not channeling in the sense I go unconscious. It's a very much conscious telepathic communication, which is different than just channeling. So anyway, as a result of all that, I've been given all this information, so I want to just share some of that. As we all know, everything is grounded on the higher levels in this incredible energy field of love, which we call the matrix of love, which is just this fundamental source energy of everything that exists, and it's where everything is held and everything emerges from, and it is a very profound energy field. It's all pervading, omnipresent, and it's just this infinite field matrix of energy which transcends all dimensions and limitations of time and space. And that's where we are. That's where we live, and all we have to do is open to it and understand how to access that. So that's the basis. Now, I have a little bit of the story of what has happened to our whole planet and solar system for the last long millennia of time. It's very simple. My story is not that super complex in detail, but it's an overview. And the overview is that for long cycles there were interplanetary wars going on in our galaxy, and there was a lot of damage and destruction, but eventually the battle was between those civilizations who supported the free evolution of individual civilizations and planets and systems, and those who wanted to come in and take control, conquer, and use these systems for their own purposes. That battle, that interplanetary war, eventually ended with the victory of the forces of light, those who respect free will and allow people to evolve and encourage and help them to evolve each system in their own timing, in their own way. So that is a very positive thing, and that the groups that formed together to achieve that victory called themselves the Galactic Light Alliance. It was all the lighted civilizations throughout the galaxy, and they are still very, very present and very active. Now, there has been, as many, many people, and you especially, Janet and Sasha, have documented, there have been incursions of different civilizations onto this planet in multiple times, and the Anunnaki being one, and there were others. And one of the ones that I was given a lot of information about was a reptilian race that came in and actually colonized the planet very intensively in a very predatory kind of, exploitive way. And they were in charge, and they set up their own systems of control. And they actually battled with the Anunnaki and ultimately drove the Anunnaki out. That's what I got about that. But they did build up these systems of control on the planet, and they've been here all along through all different civilizations, Lemuria and Atlantis and all the rest, as you well know. And they built up their system by gaining cooperation from human beings who were very impressed with the kind of powers that they had compared to ordinary humans, and they were able to set up these control systems over many centuries, and ultimately gaining full control in the recent times of the financial system, and now with the money that they have, the political system has until now been under their control, as well as the media and many other things. So they had a certain
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Question, Gordon. So are these the reptilians like David Icke presents?
I haven't deeply gotten into David Icke's work, but I know he talks about reptilians. What I received is there were 50 of them. They worked their way into the planet very early on in Earth's evolution, when it was still pretty much like a garden.
Okay, so that would be interesting if you took the time. I recommend the first one, Children of the Matrix, because it's very mind-boggling to read it, and that's kind of like a basic reference, from there on. He seemed to hit a chord, and it's hard to determine if it's 100% accurate or 50% accurate, but there's something that resonates. And of course, this is like 15, 20 years later, and everybody's kind of taken off on that. And then there's always the confusion: are the reptilians the Anunnaki? Are the reptilians a separate race? What do the Anunnaki look like? Why do they have cone heads? Why do they, have the reptilian thing? So you're saying that they came to the Earth long ago, and that seems to be what the consensus is that because they were here first, and we're like the squatters that came afterwards. Is that kind of what you're getting in your research? Are you there?
I think we lost him.
Uh-oh. Let me go see.
Seemed like he stopped in mid-sentence a little bit. So I was wondering about that,
Okay, keep talking while I call him back.
Okay, yeah. No, I was very fascinated. A lot of what he's saying is stuff I can concur with, definitely.
Okay, well, let's get Gordon back. We got his phone number. Otherwise, there he is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
We lost you. Hi, can you hear us?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. We just got cut off. But anyway, do you want to continue?
We were talking about reptilians, and that's what happened.
Yeah, that's right. That's what
right.
happened.
There you go.
Continue. Yeah, so anyway, they came in here, and the choice was made by the Solar Council to allow them to remain, provide that choice between light and dark, and humanity would make choices, experience the karma of those choices, those two different paths, and then learn from the karma of their choices. And that has been our evolutionary pattern ever since. And just as there were the dark side here, there's also been the light side with all the great teachers and masters who've come forth and given the spiritual teachings to us. And we have always been faced with this choice of what are we going to align with? What are we going to choose in our lives? And that is the learning process we go through. And so it's been a great battle between the light and dark for the heart and soul and mind of humanity ever since. And we've had many ups and downs and all of that. So what is popularly known as the Cabal had really organized itself extremely well to take control of this planet, and I know you're very familiar with a lot of this, and there's been all kinds of plots and things that they have done, carried out, and they have been able to gain through the financial system, the money system, gain a huge amount of control over everything up until recently. And they could also, through their powers, in a way, to a degree, minimize the ability of human beings to move into higher consciousness and using all kinds of manipulation techniques. So they tried to take over the planet completely with World War II, and they almost succeeded, but we did receive help from beyond the planet during that war, and there was a certain amount of support given to the Allied powers in order to be able to outlast the Axis powers. They couldn't intervene directly, the Galactics, but they did give support energetically. and that was from some of the civilizations involved in that were Sirius, the Pleiades, and Arcturus. And so they did help with us to be able to maintain, but we did not successfully drive them off the planet. They were driven back onto the astral plane, sealed up behind what's called the door where evil dwells, and they would have been kept sealed there if humanity had been able to not indulge in the kinds of negative behaviors and patterns that allowed them entrance. But we did not do that, and they reemerged into the world, life of the world, and continued with their systems, and that's how they've been able to gain more and more control. So this has all been growing, and anyone's paying attention over the last 20 to 30 years, you can see the increasing power of these kind of dark control forces. And their final plan was to have a false flag event, which would give them a chance to remove more freedoms and really institute their fundamental idea of having a Nazi-type slave planet where we all would be serving them and they would be ruling. And that final plan was 9/11. And 9/11 was a false flag event orchestrated to instill fear and remove freedoms and invade the Middle East to get control of the oil and all those things. And on the surface, they did get the Patriot Act, and a lot of things happened that actually seemed to be a success. However, 9/11 was the greatest unintended consequence in the history of the world. And the greatest unintended consequence was, now you have to look at Earth as a chakra in the body of the solar system and as the solar being, because it's a living being, the solar system, and our Earth is a living being, and all the planets are chakras within the body of that living being, the solar system. And the condition of our Earth and this chakra of the solar system was in such a dark state after 9/11 that the solar system had been ready to move forward into a higher level of energy and frequency. It was all ready to move in its evolution and had been waiting for humanity and the masters to be able to overcome the influence of the dark side and allow the planet to move into the light and actually move with the whole solar system. After 9/11, it became very clear to the Solar Council that this was not going to happen. And because their control was really intensive. And if you remember the energy around those times and what was happening with the elections and politics and everything, it was pretty clear. And so there was a decision made by the Solar Council, which is a representation of all the planets in the solar system plus other systems beyond our solar system. And they decided that the time had come to basically remove the leadership of the dark cabal from the planet. This was in 2002. And they did that. They gave the galactics permission to remove them and or turn them to the light, which a few of them did, about 10%. And then the rest of them were removed. And they are no longer present on this planet. And there are no negative aliens on or around this planet at this time. That is what I'm getting. I've gotten this very clearly ever since that time when the Galactics were given permission to do that. There have been none. And the Galactics were also given permission to radiate more and more spiritual light and love and spiritual energy to humanity, to stimulate our awakening and to allow us to begin to really work on freeing ourselves from the remaining control, which was the human beings who had been cooperating with the predatory aliens and had worked themselves into these incredible positions of power and control that were benefiting from the whole system. They still had to be dealt with. But it was a lot easier without having that control system from that higher level, because you can see that they lost that kind of leadership and they didn't really know very well how to deal with not having it. And that's why the system has gone into increasing chaos, because they don't have that level of leadership, which they had. That level of leadership had a certain degree of prevision. They could manipulate things telepathically to a degree. All that was helping them. That's all gone, and now the whole system is having deeper and deeper problems, and humanity is waking up, which makes it even harder and harder to maintain the control. And the galactic civilizations were also given permission to directly start working with all the people on this planet who are helping to bring more light, to free humanity from all the control systems, from helping any person that does anything on one little effort to help and raise consciousness or help their next door neighbor, anything positive that brings light is being supported by the Galactic Light Alliance. And they are working with world leaders. And I mean directly, and some of these world leaders know who they are. And they are interacting with them and planning, and they have a very well-developed plan to actually change the financial system, the way it functions, and make it completely fair and just, and to reform the political system, and to bring the media under a truth-telling aura instead of this complete lies and propaganda. And all of that is in process, and that plan is being worked out despite how chaotic and crazy everything looks on the surface. Underneath, there is a very well-developed plan that is steadily being worked out, and we can talk about details and examples of that if you like.
Oh, I'd like to do that, yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I know Karen's got some questions, too. Let me take the ball first, and then we'll let Karen go. Thank you for your patience,
Sure.
Karen. I can see you with your little hand up. This is the hot issue that we've been talking about. I did a big show with Andrew Bishago on Tuesday, and I'm doing a series with him because, of course, he's running for president. He has 100 proposals, and we're talking about this global economic basic minimum needs economy, some other system that prevents humanity individually and collectively from hitting rock bottom and living on the street. I have a friend of mine, he's living in his van, and it's really sad. And this is warm here, but it's really sad when, we have all these empty houses and more than enough places to have, people be somewhere. We have them in base shock or survival, out on the streets, trying to find a place to get a shower before they go to work. And he does have a job, and so he's in a big struggle. That's one thing that really interests me. And, of course, we see the failure of our political system. Our whole governing bodies, all of them, none of them work. We've tried everything. Democracy. I remember Robert Heinlein back in 1973 wrote a book called Time Enough for Love. And he basically, back then, said none of the political systems are really respecting consciousness. And he was talking about a scientific world where, there was a whole different system. And I'm really curious what the extraterrestrials or the interdimensionals or whoever, your guides are saying, because they don't use our current monetary system or political system at all. So there has to be something that's beyond this level 0 civilization, which is what we're in right now, to level 1. So do you have any comments or feedback on that?
Oh, I have tons of comments about this. I talk about it for hours. But I think the key things, there's some key things about this that are important that most people don't necessarily remember. We can't just jump from where we are to like a system where there's no money and everybody is living in love and trust and everything under the current circumstances. It's just too big a leap. So we have to have a transitional process. That's what they are working on, a very clear transitional process, which involves a complete reorganization of the financial system of the world. By that I mean all the banks' charters will be revoked, and there will be new charters issued for banks, which they will be no longer for-profit private corporations, but function like public utilities. There will be no more interest charged on money or loans or anything else. There will be debt forgiveness, and we will clean out all this manipulation through the financial system, which is massive, beyond anything anyone can even begin to imagine. It's far more than most people know. And that will allow for a new start. The other thing that goes with that is that the people who have accumulated vast sums of money, I'm talking about quintillions of dollars worth of gold, diamonds, stashed away in caves and all over the world, all this kind of stuff, that will all be taken. Any money that has been gained through manipulation of the financial system or, evil doing of any kind will be taken. Not money that has been legitimately earned or gained or inherited. All that's fine. It's money that's been taken illicitly will be taken, because the Galactics have the technology where they can scan the Earth for any substance you want and find out where every last bit of pennies or dollars or whatever are stashed away, and they will be taken. And all that money will be used for the helping of all people on the planet. We will have a massive rebuilding campaign go on when this comes about, where we will have, the military is going to be involved. They were going to turn from the conflict-oriented approach to being the ones who can mobilize the resources to go into the favelas and the slums, tear down everything, and build beautiful villages. They have technologies, the Galactics and even humanity has, where you can build a house in an hour with certain kinds of ways of putting things up. All that, rebuilding everything. One of the prime directives is going to be the restoration of the environment, and that is going to be a key of the core of all the work worldwide. When we have free energy, we will be able to set up desalination plants anywhere on the planet, and we can make the entire planet bloom like the garden. Even in Saudi Arabia, wherever you want to talk about, it's going to happen. Now, the question is, how does this happen? And that's the important one. And, you know, I have gotten a lot of information, but this is probably one of the most, I mean, other people have gotten similar things, but this is very specific. The planet Earth is going to go through an uplifting of the frequency of each and every person as the energies become more intensified. That is going to continue to go on with more and more love energy entering to the planet, but at a frequency and intensity we've never had before on the planet. And that is going to make it increasingly difficult for people who do not embody or resonate with love at all to be able to remain here. And if you study what's going on with the suicide rates, if you study what's going on with all the death rates and all the stuff that's going on, it is increasingly becoming a requirement that you have some understanding of love or a recognition of love within your being, to some degree able to resonate with it. It doesn't mean you have to be perfectly loving all the time. It simply means that you understand love and you do respond and can respond to that frequency. Because as this frequency increases, and there will come a day when there's a culmination of it, it will be so intense that only those people who have some resonance with love will be able to remain here. And that's how a lot of this shift will ultimately happen. But before that happens, we're going to continue preparing, and we are working very intensively on changing all the financial systems. And if you want to look at examples, we have the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which is an investment bank that's been set up by almost all the nations of the world, completely outside the control of the cabal, and it's becoming the new IMF and the new World Bank, and that's taking the control out of the hands of the cabal. We've had more and more people who are inventors are showing that they do have free energy systems, because the control of the cabal is weakening steadily, and they now feel safe enough to come out and talk about and offer some of these free energy systems. You can go onto the internet and buy a free energy plan to make a device for $35 and put it up and set it up in your backyard. It's not that difficult, and you can have free energy right now. It's there. And more and more of the corruption is being revealed everywhere in the financial system, in the political system. That includes the Panama Papers and many other things, and Snowden. All that is showing people that the system cannot be patched up. We have to have a completely new system. That's the purpose of all this, so that people will get to the point of realizing the system is so broken that we have to have a whole new, completely new revision, so that when these plans are offered to humanity, there will be a positive response, because people will know that we have to have something very different, and that will happen. So that's my little thought on that.
Well, thank you. Let's let Karen come in. Karen.
Man, we must be studying from the same book, because so much of what you're saying I've been following. I don't know if it's a fortunate thing or unfortunate thing, but I grew up with a conspiracy theory dad, And so I learned about the Federal Reserve and all of this stuff quite young, and everybody caught up with what he and many others had been saying. And I got, in 2009, I started doing a lot of automatic writing, and it was exactly on this transitional issue. Because you're right, it's you can't teach an old dog new tricks very quickly.
Right.
So
that's right.
So basically, so it's the idea of transition, and because the way they sort of told it to me was like, if you have it's like going through a tunnel where you go through a mountain tunnel. On one side of the mountain, it's very cold, and then you come through the transition, and it becomes warmer and warmer as you get to the sunny side of the mountain, basically.
Yes.
And it's not a quick process, and I suppose if you had a convertible, you'd have to take your coat off. There'd be adjustments along the way, and so so I was writing this in 2009, not really completely understanding what I was writing, and I just watched it unfold drastically. One of the things I didn't like being raised the way I was my father would present that information, and that's the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it except inform yourself. It was a little bit dark, In the last number of years, the changes have been very subtle. You got to know what to pay attention to, but shockingly rapid. And I work in the advocacy for a basic income guarantee. That's something I've been working pretty hard to get people aware of. Because of my learning led me into that direction. And I'm fascinated with the discussions that now are happening with people who didn't have any idea much about this stuff. Of course, the Internet, all this information has come on so we can look up and get that education. So I see this transitioning happening, and I'm hoping, let's suppose we got a basic income guarantee tomorrow. Well, if we don't deal with other parts of the economic issues like that, we're not going to be able to transition to what ultimately I think we're going to need is the abundance economy or resource-based economy where we don't utilize debt the way we do now. So I'm just curious, what are you watching for markers of the changes, and how do you feel the timelines coming along?
Okay, good, great. I'm so happy to hear that you are so aware of all these issues. This is very important. Well, one of the markers you can look for is the concept of debt forgiveness. And I don't know if you know this, but the Pope, Francis, who is, by the way, a Light Alliance key leader, despite his in the Catholic Church, which I never in a million years would have ever thought would happen, but it has said that he said last December that this year, 2016, was going to be a Jubilee year. A Jubilee year means that you have forgiveness of all sins, but also debt forgiveness is part of what traditionally has been a Jubilee year. And so we are in the process now. That's a huge signal to the world and to those who know that this process of debt forgiveness is definitely on the front burner, and it's definitely in something that's being seriously worked with. And that's all going forward. We have the way that the amount of attention that's being given, if you've noticed, to the prosecution and indictment and prosecution of so much of the financial corruption, not a lot of it, but a significantly increasing percentage of it is now coming to light more and more every day, more than it's been for decades. And that is because what the approach of the Light Alliance is to move Light Alliance, lighted people who are incorruptible into positions of power and responsibility within the system. And that's going on steadily. The turnover rate of CEOs and CFOs in all the financial hedge funds, mutual funds, banks, and all these big financial institutions has been going up and up. The amount of turnover, people leaving, disappearing, dying, or being indicted or resigning, has gone up at over 10 times the norm of that rate of turnover in the last 2.5, 3 years. That's statistically verified as what's happening, because that's how part of this change is being instituted. It's putting in better people into these important positions so that they begin to make changes in the way things are functioning. And if you notice, more and more they're selling all their oil stocks, they're selling their coal stocks, they're moving out of all fossil fuel stuff just because they can see the end is near for the fossil fuel industry. That's wonderful. That's part of the change. It's a small indicator, but it's an important one. And there is also a tremendous amount going on. The ferment in the political system, as you referenced in the beginning, is so intensive because humanity is waking up more and more, not all humanity, but a certain good portion of it, and realizing they can see that the system as it's currently run is not going to do anything to benefit them for the most part, unless the people running it for the most part are not really going to make big changes. There are candidates who are proposing major changes, but that's what people are supporting. They don't even care how wild and crazy the proposals are. They just are sick and tired of not getting anything to change. And that's why they're going for all the candidates they're supporting. And that is an indicator as well of the awakening that's going on to, and a breaking down of that thought form that Reagan and the dark forces really projected into humanity, which was government is not the solution, government is the problem. And the only answer is to shrink government down to nothing, which is completely bogus, because government is the only institution we have, if the election process works properly, where we can have some say over what and who actually is administering our collective interest. It's a very simple thing, but it's been so clouded over by all this horrendous propaganda that is spewed out constantly, day and night. And so, we are beginning to break through on some of these incredible illusions about governance, about all of it. And there's candidates who have all kinds of ideas, and we have all kinds of people running for office, as you know, and some of them are really out there, and it's astonishing that they're actually in there in the process. The plan for the future is that there will be a new set of qualifications put in place once we go through this huge shift where love is the fundamental governing energy of this planet. The new set of qualifications will be no one who's ever worked closely or collaborated with the Cabal will be eligible to run for any office, number one. Number two, people will have to be able to demonstrate that they have a record of being able to fairly represent, without personal self-benefit, the people they are supposed to be representing. And those people would be eligible to run at any level. And there are a lot of very good people interested in politics and interested in seeing that as their field of service, but not under the current circumstances, because they know it's so corrupted, and you spend all your time trying to raise money, and it's just not, and the forces are too great right now. But as we go through these changes, the whole political system is going to be organized in a completely different way, and there will be a lot more local councils that will feed their perspectives into larger and larger arenas, and that will be a very important basis for the kinds of decisions that get made.
So
thank you.
Thank you. I was back somewhere. There was a lot of words said. I think we got over Santa Claus, and I think we have been conditioned for this time through the many years of television shows and science fiction, like Star Trek. And I see Star Trek was coming out in July, and there's a new series coming out. So that part never left our collective consciousness about how we are going to do this. We already have the model, and there are people that are, there's no accident that this year is the 50-year anniversary of Star Trek, and we're having major changes. So I want to give credit to humanity for its flexibility and ability to adapt and change quite rapidly. And I'm a child of the 50s and 60s. I was born in 1954, and I grew up with the Berlin Wall. And then suddenly, whatever it was, 1981 or whatever it was, we woke up to one reality with, all these people trapped behind the Berlin Wall, and there were all these stories and movies about how they escaped or didn't escape and yada yada. And the Berlin Wall came down in one day. By sundown, it was down. And I think the extraterrestrial presence and them revealing themselves will be one day. One day we'll wake up, it will be one reality. There will be some kind of major disclosure event, and it will happen because it's time. Recently, I'm a contactee experiencer, and I get a lot of downloads and communication. And recently, I've had a whole series of, downloads about how this is going to happen. And, one of the things they told me is that the grid is still there from the original people that had populated the planet, the pyramids. And they are dormant, but they can come activated in one an hour, whatever it is, one little. And we were told that in 1951, the day the Earth stood still, where Klaatu came in and just changed it. He said, "Okay, I'm going to demonstrate the abilities that we have," and so they shut off all the power in one day. So it was I've never forgotten that, because when I saw that as a child, I went, "Whoa, this is what's really going on," because I have the awareness of who I am as an eternal being and my connection to the stars and the ancestors and the other simultaneous existences of myself. So when I saw that, I went, yep, there we go. That's going to happen someday. So somehow the demonstration or the shifting from this, see, this is a very perverted paradigm, and it just has to change. It's we're experiencing a level of perversion. Once the system becomes too perverted, what do we call it? Perturbation always comes in from the outside to, shifting and up-level it. And so that's what I've been getting. And so what they did was they came one day, and they did everything. They manifested a stage in your town, and they simultaneously were in the skies above every head. And it's not hard for them to do. They have endless craft, and then it can do holograms. But this time it's not a false flag to take our reality and further enslave us, but that there's the great awakening, the grand reunion, and at some point we remember who we are, like the DMT awakening that they presented in Solar Revolution, I think it was called, the simultaneous awakening and remembering who we are as eternal beings, as souls connected eternally to one another and to God's source. So that's what I've seen. I'm rooting for that reality, because this one here with Trump and Hillary, the election's coming, like, nah, I don't vote for that. And Laura Eisenhower, she's one, are you going to vote for that? Really? For any of that? So we vote with our hearts, minds, and soul. We keep forgetting that this is a non-local universe, and we don't have to march down to a voting place to vote or not. We vote with our beingness in any given moment when we make decisions going light or dark. 51% or more of self in service to others and self-serving. And you don't have to do tit for tat for, the person that did the good deed for you. You could just, pass it on and do it in the moment, in the now, in each waking.
Absolutely.
Every chance you can. Okay, that's enough. Back to somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think. I think it's all what you say is true. My sense of what I've gotten about this moment when everything becomes clarified is that there will be a moment not that far in the future, and this is preparatory to full disclosure and full, contact with these other civilizations. It's all preparatory, but a necessary phase. A moment when the higher being. Well, the energy field of the Earth, the way that what determines this is our Earth in our solar system, which holds our Earth, is aligned with 6 other solar systems. There's 7 solar systems together, which form the 7 chakras of a being called the Grand Heavenly Being. Just like we have 7 chakras in us, there's 7 chakras in this Grand Heavenly Being. Well, that being, is in the process of aligning all of those 7 solar systems. And when that alignment is completed, and it's almost complete, that's what's going to govern this release of this higher energy of extremely high frequency love, potent and very potent on the planet, which will be like a sort. It's like a sorting. And people who cannot resonate to that higher frequency will not be able to remain here, and they will go to places where they can continue their evolution that resonate precisely with the frequency that they hold. And that's going to be very different for very different people. But those of us who remain will be able to resonate to the love energy. And that's going to be the qualifier to be on the planet. And once that's in place, then we can do a relatively rapid reorganization of the planet and change all the financial systems, clean up the planet, and all of this. And then when that's done, and guarantee, talk about guaranteed income for every single individual human being on the planet without question. And once that's been implemented for a period of time, not that long, people will be able to release the subconscious survival fear that is one of the main mechanisms for controlling humanity right now, is keeping everybody in survival fear. Even people who have lots of money, there's always this fear because it permeates everything. So once that's changed and the support is given and they see it's given and there's a rationale and everything is explained clearly to people, they're given the true history of what actually has happened on this planet, and we can recreate this planet, stabilize that for a couple of years, then we would be ready for full disclosure. And when that happens, we will be offered the opportunity as humanity at some point in that process to join the Galactic Light Alliance, which opens a doorway for us to travel throughout the galaxy and use all the experience and all the challenges we've overcome here and help other civilizations and other systems who are going through similar things at that stage of evolution. So this has all got an incredible future ahead of us, but we have to make it through this keyhole of the portal to get through this current crisis that we're in the middle of. But when you have that perspective, it doesn't seem as overwhelming as it would otherwise,
Wow. Karen.
It seems like you and I are definitely reading from the same manual because I've had the opportunity to get to know a gentleman who worked with NASA in the Apollo years. And also here in New Mexico, we actually have a spaceport that was built by Sir Richard Branson. And in the Apollo program, most people don't know when the astronauts were coming back on the return trip, Apollo 17, a voice came on a bunch of frequencies and said, "Don't come back, you're not ready yet." was one part of the story. And then the other part of the story is, of course, these individual millionaire-type guys or billionaire-type guys trying to get some kind of working craft just to go up and ride in space for a few hours. So I'm looking at, how, what's the ticket to space? I mean, we've been trying to develop all this technology. We think it's a technology problem. But I've been pretty convinced from my guides and by observation that the ticket to space, so to speak, is to get our act together and take care of all the people on the planet, because that's like a baseline for interacting with other races. I mean, if you can't even do that, why would they want us running around up there?
Precisely, exactly right. I that's exactly it. And I totally agree. And they are here now. The galactic civilizations are all around the planet, and some of them are very actively engaged with us to help us make this very crucial step that we need to make. And the other thing is that part of the solar decree was there will be no nuclear war on this planet. There will be no more major false flag operations like we had, like 9/11, and there will be no explosion of nuclear weapons anywhere. And there just is going to be, there is a certain minimum that the children are not going to be allowed to blow up the kindergarten classroom, and that's really that's the core of it, and we are getting a lot of assistance, and there are more and more people who do know the plan and know what I've been sharing with you. They know what the plan is, and they're working very intensively towards fulfilling it. And the plans for the changing over of the financial system, and also would include a new worldwide currency for the period of time we will continue to need money, which will eventually be phased out, but there's a plan for a worldwide financial currency that will be backed by gold and commodities and will no longer be manipulable by any people just printing money. And all that is going to be put in place so that people will have confidence that in the stability of what their resources are, so they don't have to be so afraid they're going to lose everything, which is what.
Gordon,
and that's. Go ahead.
Gordon, I have a question. Okay, about the monetary system. What gives money value is what we put faith in. So this whole gold standard, which has become like the basics of humanity, has some story in antiquity about the, Nibiru and so it gained value that way. You're saying it's going to be gold back, but gold really isn't worth anything more than what we, the value we give to it. What do you think is the system universally? What do the extraterrestrials use? What will they really use to give value to money, if we're going to be using money? And then the other system is, if you look at the Enterprise, and I was on a military base one time, lived there for a year and a couple months, and we didn't really have to have money. I was on Johnston Atoll, which is, I worked as a civilian working for the military, and everything was free. Everything. The food was free, the housing was free, you could go bowling, you could play golf, you could go to the movies, everything was free. The only thing, they had one of those military stores, if you wanted to buy extra ice cream or something that you would eat after the KP, the big restaurant, whatever you call that, was shut. And you didn't need any money. So people would go there and they'd get these high-paying jobs that it would make, 6 figures, and just sock it all away. And you'd work there for 5, 6 years, from 10, 20, and you'd come home a multi-millionaire because you didn't have to spend anything, right? So and I got to see it firsthand and experience it. It was really great on many levels. So I see the model is on the Enterprise, in Star Trek. It's like, okay, you really don't need money, your needs are met. So will we move away from money completely to even like keeping track of this, that, and the other thing? And then maybe there's some way you get something to buy luxuries, but your basic needs that you have as a being incarnated in physical form will be met because you have value. The person has value. The avatar has value, and we need every person to be complete as a species. Like the Greys and other extraterrestrials. Apparently, they really come back and get they're dead and they're wounded because that's part of them, alive or dead. They want them back.
Yeah,
so,
and I think I think the picture you're painting about money, I see it as a gradual phase out of money. But at the current stage of consciousness we are, where people are so conditioned and money is such a ruling concept in human beings' consciousness, that we do have to have some medium of exchange. As free energy comes into the picture more and more, if you can put a device in your little box in your corner of your basement or backyard that's going to provide all the energy you could possibly need to do anything, and that means we can also transport around the world without airplanes and on, and everything is available to people. At some point, it's going to become clear to people, well, what do we need money for, right? Just like you're describing. But until we have to sort of move into that, as we go forward. And right now, because of the survival fear, because people have been so ripped off and manipulated, and so much has been stolen from them, they don't trust that they will have enough. And it takes a tremendous effort of will and revolution of consciousness to believe in and experience the abundance of the universe, which is real. And it's all controlled by your consciousness and what you think and how you hold it. And if you think it's a scarce universe, it'll be a scarce universe for you, because that's what the universe will give you, whatever you think it is. And so to change that to an abundance concept and change your consciousness requires tremendous transformation of an individual's and their thinking, and their whole subconscious has to change. And that's not small matter. It's not easy. I know. I've worked with people all the time about this. And so but it is doable. But as there's a collective transformation of the concept of abundance, which is, well, there's been a reorganization of our world. People saw that it was wrong, that it was unfair, and it was punishing, and it was horrible. We, many people in the world, the leadership and the collective whole of human consciousness, said we got to have a better system, and we created it, where there's a sharing of the wealth by everyone, for everyone's highest good. So everyone can be free to create and do things and dance and sing and write poetry and paint and do whatever is going to bring them joy and share that with everybody else. What a world that will be, right? If you wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to create today, rather than what horrible job am I going to go off to try to survive? And this is where we're going. And so, but it's going to take that shifting of consciousness more and more, and real actual actions to confiscate the incredible sums of money that have been stolen, and make that and put it into circulation for the good of everybody. That's part of the plan.
Like you said, I think that'll be easy to discover because it's all kind of marked anyway.
Or you can't hide it.
You can't hide it. If you go back to the Enterprise, when they scanned, they could find whatever they wanted: minerals, people, what type of being it was, and
exactly.
So I think that'll be easy enough.
And it's just getting the conditions in the world to the place where this can actually occur. And there's two factors at work. There's the Galactic Alliance's interaction with humanity and all the planning and work that's being done behind the scenes to bring that about. And there is this alignment between the 7 solar systems. When that's completed, which could be very soon, there's going to be this release of energy, and all the resistance is going to be gone. Totally.
Yes.
It's the cosmic sort.
I think for a while we're going to need people trained in psychotherapy to help these people go from one reality to the next. That's what I got 20 years ago when I came to this property. I just really saw this time. And so it would really behoove everybody to learn some good skills to kind of reach one, teach one, and what do they do? They do this peer co-counseling, and to help people adjust from this old concept of lack and poverty consciousness to, hey, now you have everything you need. Well, we're running out of time. Isn't that amazing? We've got 3 minutes. Let's see, Karen, do you have any final words for Gordon? And then we'll let Gordon.
Just that he's right on it. I just right on it and keep going. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that we're going to see a disassembling of a lot of the housing in the world, not just by kind of with technologies the Galactics have. We don't have to tear it down, and we'll just make it go away, and then we will rebuild new kinds of buildings where they made a living substance where they respond to the people as they walk into the building. And respond to your energy, your mood, and they change color and they change shape and all these things that are so far hard for people to imagine, but it's all real. It's not just some fantasy. This is actually the way it is. And so I just want to share with people, if they would like to know more about my work, I have the book I wrote, The Transfiguration of Our World, How a Light Alliance is Transforming Darkness and Creating a New Earth. And also we have a website, livethefuturenow.com, and on that website we have all kinds of videos people can watch, and I have a regular monthly show called the Galactic News Updates from the Light Alliance, where I give all my latest information that I'm receiving. I share that with people. We have a lot of people come on that show. It's once a month, and it's very cheap. And then you can learn about what's coming through, and we do trainings and all kinds of other programs. So just livethefuturenow.com. That's our best source for more information.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Gordon, for coming on our show. Look forward to seeing you you're going to Contact in the Desert, is that right?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, I will be there. So
good. Yes.
Well,
I think
Contact in the Desert.
it'll be a great time, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, it's June 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. ContactInTheDesert.com. Well, thank you so much. We're going to take a short commercial break, And then we'll be back with Colleen Mauro. Thank you very much, Gordon. And stay there, Karen. We'll be back in about 4 minutes.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.
Join the KCOR Digital Radio Network Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific as we connect the dots and unravel the cosmic mysteries with Divine Paradigm. Divine Paradigm, hosted by Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin. Interview those in the know, whether it be researchers, whistleblowers, contactees, or military mind control programs.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Have you ever wanted to learn about ancient texts, suppressed history, spiritual ascendance, as well as past, future, and simultaneous life existences?
This is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make.
Then you need to tune into Divine Paradigm.
Divine Paradigm.
Tuesdays at 2:30 p.m. Pacific, 5:30 p.m. Eastern.
I'm doing it. I can do it. I'm doing it.
Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Coming March 1st, 2016.
Every region of the world and most countries can go back in their history and trace their origins, traditions, and religions to a creator god or an angel from the sky, the stars, heaven, or even underground from the underworld. This is the common story of extraterrestrials seeding our planet. My name is Reverend John M. Polk. I am an international metaphysical minister, a Reiki master teacher, and a medium. My book is Yahweh, the Biblical God is an Alien. The premise of my book is that there is a real God and that Yahweh is a creator God alien who is indicating he is ready to reveal his alien origins to humanity at this time. You can find my book at johnpolkmedia.com. That's JOHNPOLK media.com. johnpolkmedia.com.
My name is Karen Christine Patrick, and I want to tell you about the Cleanse for Life solution from Isogenics. The need to cleanse is vital in today's dangerously toxic world. Our demanding lifestyles, environmental toxins, poor nutrition, and daily stresses overload our body's own detoxification defenses. Unlike a colon cleanse or laxative product, Cleanse for Life uses a synergistic blend of gentle cleansing herbs and other natural compounds to ensure the energizing nutrients flood into the body as the toxins are cleansed out. My favorite Isogenics product is the Cleanse for Life solution. I drink it as a hot beverage in the morning every day. You can find out more at my website, kcpatrick.isogenics.com. That's K, C as in cat, patrick.isagenix.com. kcpatrick.isogenics.com. Cleanse for Life.
Who are we to say? With all the planets and all the galaxies and all the solar systems, we're the only intelligent life form? We can't. Alien Cosmic Expo. An out-of-this-world experience here on Earth. Your eyes will be open to an exciting lineup of speakers, exhibitors, and copious aha moments. Experiencers, UFOs, extraterrestrials. It's all coming. Alien Cosmic Expo. June 24th to 26th at the Best Western Plus Brant Park Inn. Tickets at aliencosmicexpo.com.
Aloha, and we're back. This is Janet Kira Lessin and Karen Christine Patrick on the Aquarian Radio Network, aquarianradio.com. And this second hour, we have Colleen Mauro, and she has 30 years' experience in magazine publishing, including work as a publisher, editor, advertising director, and circulation and marketing consultant. A lifelong interest in the untapped powers of the mind led her to the launch of Intuition magazine in 1988. Intuition explored the higher potential of the mind and the many varied ways of knowing, intuition, inspiration, and telepathy, providing research and how-to information in easy-to-read form for the general reader. So let me go to the website. Her book is called Spiritual Telepathy, Ancient Techniques to Access the Wisdom of Your Soul. And let me see about the book. In the book here, they speak of the soul as a portal to a universe source of inspiration. In her book, she introduces a more advanced form of intuitive perception that she calls spiritual telepathy. Her book offers ancient mind training techniques that allow readers to access the wisdom and guidance of their own souls and beyond it to the riches of the universal mind. Called A Splendid Guidebook by Larry Dossey, Mauro's highly practical approach and accessible language will open new doors for anyone committed to a spiritual path. And her book is Spiritual Telepathy. And I have a lot of information about Colleen on aquarianradio.com. Please check it out, aquarianradio.com. Before we bring Colleen, let's see if I got to put the mute off mic, or the mic's off mute, the mute's off mic. Okay, Karen, Christine, Patrick, are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Excited to know about our guest because I really do think it's important to pursue, growth spiritually and using your mind. That's really, really important, and people don't know how to go about it. So I'm excited to hear what she has to say.
Okay, welcome to our show, Colleen Mauro.
Thank you for having me. I love doing a double bill with Gordon. I stayed up until 3 a.m. When his book came out. I just couldn't put it down. It's fabulous.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. So don't read it unless you're going to do an all-nighter. Excellent. Okay. I've done that before. It's like, I got to get up. Oh, no, it's 3 a.m. I'm going to get 3 hours of sleep. Stop reading. Anyway, well, that's good stuff. So do tell us about yourself, Colleen, about a little bit more on your bio, who you are and how you got into this, and about your book.
Okay, I will tell you a little bit about how I started in this field. And I love to tell the story because it's such a good illustration of the actual experience. I had always been interested in the spiritual world and intuitive studies. And in the late 80s, I was living in San Francisco, and I had worked for several alternative magazines. And I suddenly found myself without a job, and I was trying to figure out what to do. I had already worked for all the magazines I liked, so I was a little bit stumped and not sure what my next step was. And I spent my days talking to editors, researching new magazines, and worrying about money. I was very, very worried about money. San Francisco is such an expensive place to live. And one morning I woke up and I thought, boy, I need a break from this. So I'm going to give myself a mental health day. I'm going to spend one 24-hour period where I don't think about the fact that I'm unemployed, and I'm just going to enjoy the day. It was October, I remember, and that's my favorite month in San Francisco. So I went out and bought some bulbs, and I decided I was just going to put around in my garden for the day. And as I was puttering around, I had a type of intuitive experience that I'd never had before. A thought suddenly flashed through my mind, and the thought was the Center for Applied Intuition. And I had always accessed intuition through feelings or body-based sensations, but this was a purely mental experience. The words seemed to have been dropped right into my brain, and I immediately knew that it wasn't my thought, and it certainly made no logical sense. It really stopped me in my tracks. I just stood there with a rake in my hand. I knew about the center, and I had met Bill Kautz, the founder, but I couldn't imagine why I would go there to look for a magazine job. I knew he had a tiny 2-room office and that he did intuition trainings, but it just made no sense in the context of what I was looking for. So I mulled it over for a few days, and I thought, well, what the heck, and I called him and asked him to send me information about the center's activities. And a few days later, I got a big manila envelope, and when I dumped it out, I found several brochures and a very simple typewritten journal called Applied Psi. And this was the quarterly publication that he sent to the center's 200 members. And it was all about the subjects of intuition and creativity. And as I was flipping through the pages, I suddenly had an idea. I thought, this could be a real magazine. It would have to be spiffed up and the name changed, but these are fascinating subjects that I really felt would appeal to a much wider audience than this tiny membership that he had. So I called him and made an appointment to speak with him. And when I arrived at the center, I told him about my idea, and he just lit up and said that he had always dreamed of turning Applied Psi into a real magazine, but the right person had never come along. So I went home and I banged out a proposal. I came back the next day, and I was suddenly launching a magazine. We called it Intuition, a magazine for the higher potential of the mind. And I got 2 issues out before Bill closed the center and signed the rights over to me. And I later got a grant and set up an office and hired a staff. And when I think about it now, there are several interesting things about this story. One, I never could have gotten there through rational process. It never would have occurred to me to look him up when I was looking for a magazine job. Two, I got something better than what I was looking for. And I couldn't have seen that in the next decade there would be a flood of information on this subject, and the magazine provided a focal point. And I ran the magazine till the year 2000. And then I started to study the Ageless Wisdom teachings, and I was immediately intrigued by the subject of spiritual telepathy, and I could see that this was a higher level of intuitive perception and the next logical step to the work that we had done in the 90s. I think teaching people about honoring their intuition and providing them with the basic skills really provided the foundation for what's now this more advanced work.
Uh-oh.
I still hear you.
Oh,
there
you are.
Here. We're all together.
All of a sudden. Go ahead. Keep going.
And spiritual telepathy, I can define it as communication from the subtle worlds, from our souls, or from higher beings, as exactly what Gordon's describing. And communication from this level is always telepathic, as he's just described. We don't audibly hear the information. It's dropped into our brains where it's formulated into thought exactly as it occurred in the garden for me. And what's really fascinating and interesting to me about this subject, and what really kept me studying this for years, was the idea that we don't have to wait for a spontaneous experience like I had in my garden, that we can actually train our minds to access the soul and the higher worlds at will, that it's a process of building a bridge from the lower mind to the soul. And when we do that, we do have access to this higher world, to the soul, to the universal mind, and to these higher beings that guide the evolution of the planet.
Fascinating. Karen, you there?
You hit a hot button. I really like what you said about honoring your intuition, because I started my life in a belief system where we were supposed to really focus on mental, machination of your mental mind, and spirituality was intellectualized, and intuition was kind of frowned upon. So it's good. I got some good tools of the mind, but being rational and skeptical and all those kinds of things, and then having a spiritual basis that was, kind of that side of the brain. But I found it dissatisfactory as I got older. But I really had to overcome that honoring part, like you were saying, because it was hard for me to let go and do that. Once I did, a lot of stuff flooded in that I wish I'd known earlier, right? That's good, because, a lot of people are kind of stuck in patterns of thought that only gets you so far, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Could you talk a little more about that? That's great.
Me? Karen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Karen, do you want Karen to talk more about it?
Oh, no, I was asking you, Colleen. Sorry.
Okay. Well, one thing that is always caused me to wonder is about why do only some people have the ability to communicate with the higher worlds? We just heard Gordon talk about it. We know that Joan of Arc, for example, talks to saints and angels. Eileen Caddy received the guidance that led to the founding of the Findhorn community in Scotland. And the botanist George Washington Carver walked in the woods each morning to talk to God. And apparently God was talking back. He called it the divine radio. And whenever I'd read about these people, I always felt this longing, and I always wondered, why does this happen only to some people? Are they more evolved than the rest of us? Is this somehow preordained? And by immersing myself in this topic, it was really wonderful to discover that with the proper training, we can all cultivate this ability. And when we do this, we do become intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds, that we can pull in higher levels of wisdom and knowledge, both for our own lives and for the service that we're here to provide. It's like being the arms and legs of God. It's said that the higher beings that guide the evolution of our planet cannot directly affect life on Earth. They have to work through us. So they're always looking for those of us who have that channel between the soul and the brain, soul, mind, and brain, because we have to be able to have the information reach the brain in order for it to be part of our conscious awareness. And it's the experience that I described in the garden where it actually feels like information is just being thrown down into your brain.
So I came in and I was pretty much open, and I was getting all this information. And, of course, when you're raised in a very conservative Christian world like I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my mother thought it was, demons. And I learned to stifle this natural ability. I was also fearful that I'd be deemed crazy, because that's what we did to people back before we became more aware of this. And still, in many places, it's dangerous to talk about things like this, because they'll medicate you and try to bring you down and hold you back from this understanding. My question for you is, how do we help people understand that they really do have these abilities, that these are things that are, it's like you're not crazy, you're not hallucinating. And then what about the people that really are diagnosed and they seem to be crazy? Are they perhaps just receptors that are getting more information? They don't know how to integrate and sort it out and make sense out of it? What are your thoughts on all that?
That could be true. I think there's also different levels that we can access, and it's said that there's an astral level where there are a lot of discarnate beings, and that's a sort of dangerous level to try to tune into, because you never really know what you're experiencing. And I think a lot of people that have that kind of disturbance probably are tapping into that. And what's really important about this is that it's a mind training where we extend our attention directly up to the soul. So we're bypassing that astral level, and we're going straight to the upper reaches of the mental level, where we become one with the experience. It's not like we're channeling some discarnate entity. We're actually tuning in directly to the information that's there.
Mhm. So how do you?
I've always wondered that question, though, too. Is that
Yeah.
some of these people that are hearing voices, and what are they hearing? Is this really real? Are they accessing some astral entity or something? So I think that's a good question.
Yeah, I had a cousin when I was growing up who, they said he was crazy, but looking back on it, he's now deceased. So they medicated him with things that are very toxic and dangerous, and he was dead by the time he was 40. But I think back in those days, and it's very sad, maybe he really was just psychic, and there wasn't any kind of reference for him, and so everybody tried to, quiet him down and put him into a box. But if somebody else would have taken him and trained him, he might have been, a gift to humanity and bringing forth information from the other side or something. So it's very sad, and I wish we had a better understanding of what's going on. And I know there are many organizations over time that try to, they try to talk to the dead and talk to the other side and sort this all out. Are we talking to our guides? Is it, right. And today we have things like mind control and, scalar weapons, and, it's even harder to sort it out before when we didn't have the government doing all their stuff to people, the interference. So I don't have any more than questions, and I'm asking you what perhaps we can help people with, how they can sort it out and not automatically assume that you're crazy because you're getting some kind of information. I'm blessed. I married my shrink, and he's helped me sort this out for years. Doing therapy and hypnosis and all kinds of things. So now I have a better understanding, and so I get these. The more you understand it, the more you get, right? So I get these huge, wonderful downloads of information that's way beyond, my Janet capability of even imagining, right? It's higher level consciousness. And so I feel very blessed. And go ahead.
Well, it's not really my area of expertise, but I'd say that having medical care, a therapist who has a transpersonal kind of orientation is really essential.
Right, and it was interesting you mentioned Findhorn. My husband studied holotropic breath work at Findhorn with Stan Groff in the early years as he was trying to figure out the holographic universe and what people were accessing in their non-ordinary states of awareness and helping people integrate that information. Some people were using just the breath work, and some people were using entheogens to try to sort it out. So it's just a very interesting field, and I'm still affected by it because I'm very, very psychic and open, and I don't want to shut it off because that's what people tend to do. They shut it off. Oh, I just got to go be normal, right? So I'm going to shut this down and not pay attention to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where do you think the information is coming from? Do you have any sense?
Well, I've done a lot of work on it. Sometimes I'm accessing my higher self. Sometimes I access people that are discarnate, and a lot of people are trapped in the bardo. Some people want help. Some people want to just communicate information. I'm also in touch with interdimensionals, and some are extraterrestrial. I've been on board ships, and, I'm an experiencer. I've had a wide range of experiences. I'm 62 years old, and I'm really blessed that I have someone to help me integrate these experiences. And now they're panning out when I talk to people like yourself and do the radio shows and go to these conferences, and there are, millions and millions of people that are open, aware, conscious, and having experiences in various levels, and are working to integrate it and make sense of it all. And Karen is also an experiencer too.
Yes, yes, I am.
Yeah, go ahead,
and I didn't exactly have like a spiritual guide or anyone to really work with. Actually, my guides were my spiritual guides because they, when you start to plug into the information, it sort of teaches you more about it. The more you're open, the more you're trusting it. I followed a lot of experts. In the past in my life, I look up to some hierarchical leader or whatever to kind of, get my cue as how to live my life. And then I started having experiences where I didn't really have good leadership in my life to understand what was happening to me. So I was really forced to go inside and find the answers within, I guess you'd say. I'm interested in how you had the term spiritual telepathy come to you. And I was wondering, because that seems a very integrated term. I really like it because a lot of times people have these big separations between, like, spiritual influence versus telepathy might be more mental kind of thing. But it's all kind of the same feeling because it's all an opening, letting the information come in without judgment, and then, kind of pondering and, filling it out, having a feeling about the information. What are some of the, ways when you would explain to somebody that they're beginning to get in touch with that and beginning to figure that out?
Well, spiritual telepathy is a term that comes from the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, and the Wisdom Teachings tell us that there's actually 3 types of telepathy, and the lowest is instinctual or feeling-based telepathy, and we share this type of telepathy with the animal kingdom. And it's still used as a means of communication in indigenous cultures, and it was really interesting to research that. The second is mental, or mind-to-mind telepathy. And then the highest is spiritual or soul-to-soul telepathy. And what I like about this teaching is that it illustrates the progression of our perceptual abilities, from the instinct of early man to the intellect of modern man to the pure intuitive knowing of the future man. And we're right at that doorway now where we can take that step into this higher world. And when we do this, we really extend our perceptual abilities beyond the reaches of the human world into the superhuman world. So it really is an evolutionary step. So it was fascinating to study this, and I really sort of grabbed onto it, and I couldn't let it go. I spent years and years studying this material, and it was just absolutely fascinating to me.
That's the interesting progression, because that's pretty much the progression as I, really took this topic on, because I have a Native American background, so I kind of got that, connection with nature thing. That seemed real comfortable and natural and didn't seem weird, And then I started, kind of dealing with the mind-on-mind types of things, even did experiments with friends and, other beings. And then, it comes into this concept of the knowing, where everything that there is to know is available, and it can just be there. I mean, you have this trust within yourself that you can experience that, and you have the knowing. And so suddenly I'd find myself saying something, And I realized something took over my mind and even my mouth of what I'm saying, and I'm going, wow, that's some really good ideas there. It's almost like I'm an observer of it instead of just being the center of it. I'm just kind of watching it go by. Going, well, that was really smart. I wish I would have thought of that. But yeah, it's like or in writing, when I got into automatic writing, which really helped me learn that trust process, because it was kind of eebie-deebie about everything at first, and I could just kind of just spill it out on the page, so to speak, and then come back and read it and, get the feeling of, wow, I'm really drawing this from an interesting source. And I don't want to say it's separate from me, because I don't think everything's separated quite like that, but it was just like another observation point, maybe, another higher observation point, especially because I was able to tap into, I'm down here in my world. At the time that this first started for me, I was at very extreme economic pressure, trying to deal with a lot of family issues, and I was a little bit, help me. And the guidance was really smart. It was like a little bit above my emotional level of where I was at, and helped me, through that. I don't know what I would have done without it, because I kind of ran out of the human, normal things that we run to. It just didn't seem to be working for me. And so I think you're right, and I think as a collective, we're kind of getting to the end of some experiments of belief systems that are not serving anymore. And I didn't ever think that would change, but in the last couple of years, learning from people like you and talking to people, I'm feeling more and more hopeful, because people that I never thought would kind of get in this direction are suddenly popping in to the frequency and reflecting back. All of a sudden we seem to be saying the same things, because we're kind of now more together as a collective, heading in, I hope, a better direction. I'm going to keep believing that for sure. What is that your feeling too? Because you've been in this a long time. Is that kind of your impression as well?
Well, I definitely think that we're expanding our perceptual abilities, absolutely. The wisdom teachings talk about the mind being designed to work in two directions, and I found this really interesting. We know that the mind can extend outward and provide us with information about the physical world, but we can also train it to extend upward to access information from the subtle worlds. And when we do this, the mind becomes a tool that we can use to make contact and explore the higher worlds. And when we do this kind of mind training, and it really requires a daily discipline, but the mind then becomes our servant rather than our master. And when we do this, traditional forms of channeling or mediumship really become obsolete, because the mind becomes like our own internal search engine. And I think this is what you're talking about, that it can extend out into the cosmos, gather information, then download that information directly into our brains. So we don't really need to go for a psychic reading or a channeling or see a medium, because we don't need the middleman, so to speak. We can go direct and get the information for ourselves. And what was the most exciting to me is that we can train ourselves to get the information at will, that we don't have to wait for it to pop in and hope that it will pop in.
Usually that's kind of quick. Yeah, I call
me?
that Googling. I call that Googling the ethosphere.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's how I think of it, too. It's our own internal Google.
We encourage in our therapy practice, we encourage people to trust their own guidance and get in touch with their own intuition, instead of, going to a psychic that's going to tell them how to lead their lives and what's going to, they're going to meet this guy or whatever. And so we, keep redirecting it back to self, and the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And it's interesting you mentioned, different forms of telepathy. As an experiencer contactee, we find, most experiencers find that the extraterrestrials don't use their voice. They're telepathic. And so it appears from the studies we have of the experiencers is that we're all telepathic. We just have to trust and believe that information we're getting really is true and real, and start tuning into it. So there's downloads and the type of communication that's beyond this using vocal cords and a mouth, and that's real and true as well. And there's something else I was going to say, but I forget what it was. So back to you, back to somebody else.
So you have experienced this with extraterrestrials actually transmitting information telepathically?
Oh, yes, I have, most definitely. It's a normal way of communicating. And most people that have had contact with extraterrestrials communicate in that way. I'm going to, there appears to be like some kind of emergency going on. Karen, you guys talk, and I'll be right back. I'm sorry, there's my husband keeps calling, so he knows I'm on the show. So. Okay, I'm going to mute and go see what's going on. Okay, you keep talking. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just share real quick. I achieved, I kind of blew through all my blockages and began to really flood in a lot of telepathic contact with a couple of different species. I finally had to get him to kind of back off a little because I was a bit overwhelmed as a human because I just kind of opened up some doorway, you know. But, yeah, it was some of them were way more visual. It seemed like they were really super visual when they communicated. Others were like, it was different modalities for different ones. What I kind of understood is telepathy is more the norm, you know, out there because it's a lot faster. And and it's deeper, it's more frequency all at once. And sometimes I've had downloads that are literally almost just like a download. Like you're unloading this huge file, and you kind of have to like open it in bits at a time to kind of understand it. And sometimes I get the information. It take me a while to, sort it out because it was so overwhelming or just very different kinds of contacts. And then some of them said that the only time they use verbal language is to make a contract. It's because that frequency is a little bit more. It creates a thought form impression. So they make a verbal contract, and they do that with formal language, but most of the rest of the time they do like telepathy based. And the thing that struck me too is that really humans have, like you said, thought that like there's a shaman or a medium or somebody like that that's special that has that ability. And what we're going to find out is that humans all are telepathic by nature. We just kind of put that aside for a while we did modern society and, kind of talked about people being superstitious, and religion, said only holy men can say things like that. But we're, like I said, we're kind of running out of ideas as the system begins to change, it's the imperative comes back on us as beings to seek out wisdom and knowledge ourselves instead of waiting for someone to tell us. So I think this is what we discover is that we do have this ability. I like to tell people, how you have telepathy if you walk into a room and you see somebody and instantly there's you either like them a lot or maybe not so much. And it proves to be true, that you're either going to have trouble with them or you're going to be a great friend. And that's because of the energy that we carry around with us, making a resonance, that we resonate with each other or not. So, yeah, this is kind of some of the things that you found, too, is that humans really just forgot to do this. It's not like we don't have the ability. We've just put it aside for a while.
I absolutely think that's true, and I think that's one of the things that we did in the 90s when we were teaching people to honor and use their basic intuition, that we're reclaiming something that we lost with the scientific worldview, that we came up from the instinctive telepathy to the mental level where we decided that only what we can know with the mind is really true, and the old ways were considered superstitious and so on. So we were helping people to really validate their gut feelings, because that's another way of getting information that we had learned to discount. And I thought it was really interesting as this work kind of permeated into the wider culture, the way people started talking about it. And I saw it a lot in the political world. And it used to be written off as women's intuition or, maybe something for a creative artist. But no prominent person would ever admit to making a decision by anything other than rational means. And then all of a sudden you have this word popping up in the political process. George Bush talked about being a gut player, and his Homeland Security person, Michael Chertoff, gave a news conference, I think it was in 2007, where he said he had a gut feeling that we were going to be attacked that summer. And I thought, wow, really interesting. It really says a lot about, how commonplace this is now and how people really start to validate it and to think of it as a natural ability. And when that happens, when it's in the culture like that, I think it's time for the next step. And that's why I got excited when I started to read this material. I thought, this is the step beyond. We've kind of had all these books, trainings, and audio programs on intuition, and there's not really that much new to say about those basic trainings. Now there's something that's higher that we can do. And it seems to me that all this field goes sort of in cycles, and it seems to be sort of in decades. That in the 70s, psychism was a big thing, and there were tons of books and trainings and schools on psychic development. And then in the 80s, it was channeling, and I remember the magazines and books and trainings came out about that. In the 90s, it was intuition, and then after the turn of the century, that remote viewing was a really big deal, and there was a lot of books and trainings. And so I think this is the next wave. This higher telepathic work is really sort of the next wave, and then there'll be something higher.
Right.
Where do you think the information that you get is coming from?
For me?
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Janet.
Karen, both of us.
Yeah, Karen.
Okay.
Karen, where do you think it's coming from? Yeah.
Well, as I've kind of developed my understanding of it, one helpful, you kind of have to get this by word pictures or something. It helps me anyway. And one was like a tree. Okay, so a tree is connected at the base, and then it goes up to branches and smaller branches, and finally the leaves. And we're kind of spiritually, we're sort of the leaves of a tree, and we're all sharing the same trunk and grounding, right? It's all one thing. It's all one tree. So if you're a little leaf dingling way up over here, normally you wouldn't think you could communicate in a sense with a leaf on the other side of the tree, except that if you realize your connection to the whole thing, then you realize it's all one thing. That facilitates talking to some being in another part of another galaxy. And then a couple other things that help is openness, being kind of open-minded, being kind of grounded in source so you lose your fear, because a lot of people get really afraid they're going to contact something bad. And you need to gain some, good feelings about that. You trust your intuition, know that everything's for your highest and best good. And as you ground yourself in that, you're able to have a more sophisticated or open viewpoint, and you won't get swallowed up in fear. And another thing that's really important is gratitude and appreciation for all of creation, because when you do begin to connect with other beings, they could be really different from you. And, it can be uncomfortable, like, wow, you're an insect. I'm afraid of spiders, and this is an insectoid being, it's like, what's that about? So it'd be like, okay, so I have to appreciate spiders, and I have to appreciate this other being, and find out about their culture and who they are as an individual. So the appreciation of even some being that might be really contrarian to your thinking, just to say, okay, well, I could see how you could feel that way. I don't feel that way. Kind of super diplomatic. You start to feel like a galactic diplomat when it comes to contacting beings. So that's one word picture I use.
But do you have any sense of where the information, where these beings are?
Yes, I do. One of the first was, well, first of all, I got in touch with ancestors. So that was the first important one for me, to get in touch with my ancestor spirits, to kind of ground me and help me understand things and feel confident in myself. And then one group was like a combined group, so they all have telepathy with each other. They don't really leave their planet. They connect with beings telepathically with other planets and just enjoy kind of exploring space that way through telepathy. Another was a being that's a representative of his kind on a spaceship. Don't have too many of those. Most of mine are kind of multidimensional, interdimensional. So there's a number of them that are pure visual. They act like a mime, basically, and kind of act out what it is they want to communicate. And it just kind of depends on which individual I'm dealing with. One was an Anunnaki ancestor, which is a bit of a shock. But that was important for me to do my Anunnaki research that I'm doing now. I'm working with Janet, and he's a character because he's observed humanity for a long time. Some beings are, people say they. So they'll say they. Do they like us or do they hate us? I'm like, wait a minute, that's a lot of different individuals that you're calling they, okay? And my general feeling is some beings really love us and are helping us, and I agree with an ascended master, very closely trying to help us. Some just are indifferent. They're just kind of, okay, there's some humans, whatever. And some kind of don't like us. And that contrarian spirit is not necessarily completely a bad thing. It's just that they look at things like how we treat each other, how we have wars, how we treat children and allow them to be starving in the street. And that's kind of like, if we want more beings to like us, we need to kind of clean up our act as a collective just a bit. So it's a very interesting experience, and I'm enjoying talking to people about it. And I learn new stuff every day and try to, share it and share the process. I think it's great that you're sharing how to do this with people because they get curious and they want to try it, but they don't know how to go about it.
And does this happen through dreams for you, or just in your waking hours? Both.
It basically before 2009, it was in my dream world, and then when I allowed it to kind of come through, I had like a very jarring awakening, and so when that happened, and I was just let it all in. I want to know everything. Then it became waking hours, absolutely. I was able to do some channeling, automatic writing, voice channeling. I don't do it in person or, for a group or anything like that, but now it's pretty much I have a feeling of the energy signature of the beings. I've done translation work, so like one time Saka asked me to have me communicate with them, and instead of like channeling, I just translated like a translator would do. And then now I've probably gotten more into the knowing aspect, so I've really learned to trust that if I hear something in my mind, and sometimes they just really want me to know something, the most recent thing they really wanted me to know about is the fact that there's an significant underworld story on our planet with not just the military bases that some people know about, but also many, many chapters of human history where we've lived underground, plus other races who've lived underground, and that this is something that a few researchers, Corey Good and David Wilcock comes to mind, says that we're going to find out a lot more about. Is probably the first way we're going to learn about extraterrestrials. And I wasn't too sure about that. I always had a vision the ships would come down and they'd walk out of the ships. Maybe it's too dangerous for them. I don't know. But that started flooding in, and at the same time that they started giving me this information, all of a sudden people were sending me links right and left about these underground places that have been found all over. One of them was a huge, huge carved out area in China, and I have on Facebook I have a group, Earth Anomaly Research Society. If people look that up, I've got several stories about this huge cave structure that's just. It would have you could have driven a mothership or even any kind of huge, ginormous ship that we have or any kind of large airplane could easily be stored in there. It's just that big. It even has its own weather, actually. It's that big. So all of a sudden, if I want to know something about it, the information just comes to me. So that's why I believe in the knowing as really something that helps us because we need that help right now. And I believe the Internet is our, training wheels for the actual, Internet, INNERMET.
Well, there's an esoteric concept of the etheric web that connects everyone and everything. So no surprise that we have sort of a physical representation of that in our World Wide Web, that it does connect everybody.
Yes, and I was going to do a talk. I still haven't done it, but I may yet. Because I do have a computer science background, comparing what we're learning when we learn how to use the Internet as information in a pretty pure form, and it's mentally conceptual. And we're getting more and more towards that virtuality as we go along in our technology. And basically, we're heading into understanding the world as a quantum hologram, and understanding this interconnected web. The Cherokee and many native cultures call the weaving of the spider grandmother. Who weave the basis of the world, and so I kind of identify with that. And I've actually met interdimensional beings who are very much spider-like, so that was kind of fun. So we're going to move into this kind of gradually as we're ready. They're not going to make us feel uncomfortable.
And do you think that you had a natural facility for this, or is it something that you trained yourself to do?
I believe I had a natural ability because I was screened in something called Project Talent in California. They were looking at the gifted and talented population of the American school children. And Andrew Bouchard and several other people have pointed out that they were recruiting psychic children in the school system. It was kind of during the Cold War, so they were trying to use, psychic warfare and remote viewing. So I was being assessed for that program, and there was what I believe a divine intervention, or my higher being, intervention to not allow me to be in that program, because I think it would have been really bad for me, but rather they kind of took me down a different path. But I had to let my belief systems change quite a bit, because I had a religious background, so I was really reluctant. But as soon as I kind of opened that door and let it happen, basically they told me they were going to catch me up from where I had left off and push that stuff away to, where I'm at right now. And I also have a family history of people that are psychic, and I come from Druidic, Irish, and a shaman Cherokee background. So I think it's a family thing. Some people embrace it, and some people are more afraid of it and want to live a more rational life.
One of the things
I have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Have you ever experienced telepathic communication with another human being?
I think that we do. We have that instinctive telepathic communication all the time. And Rupert Sheldrake talked about this a lot in his book, The Sense of Being Stared At. Came out, I think, 2001 or 2. And he did a lot of experiments on this. And one of the things he says is that it's strongest with the people that we're closest to, mates, parents and children, our best friends and so on. And that makes sense in that it's also strongest in some sort of dire circumstance, where there's a death or there's some sort of emergency, that somebody that you're close to is going to feel that. And so it was very interesting, because the Ageless Wisdom teachings talk about how this type of telepathy is feeling-based. And so he was really validating that it does operate most strongly with the people that we're close to. So when I wrote the book, before I wrote it, I actually thought very carefully about how to present the material, because the source material was very esoteric, and I wanted it to be read by an audience beyond those that were just already reading esoteric books. So I looked to see if I could bring in any of the science. So I really did a lot of research and was happy whenever I saw something that really could validate this. So Rupert Sheldrake has done a lot to validate this type of telepathy. He also calls it instinctual. He says it's part of our biological nature. And so he used some of the same terms that you'll find in esoteric books. So I was really happy and really enjoyed reading his books. He has one on animal telepathy that's really fascinating that came out a few years later, I think. But I asked a lot of friends, and I got a lot of great stories. One person told me that her mother was dying of some kind of cancer, I forget which, but she was in Wisconsin. She was in California, and she took the red-eye flight to Chicago, and then she was going to change planes. And before she got to Chicago, she fell asleep, and she woke up suddenly, and tears were running down her face, and she knew that her mother had just died right in that moment. So she got to Chicago to change planes. Her brother was there, and before her brother said anything, she said, "I already know, Mom died." And then she looked at the death certificate, and it recorded that exact time. And I thought that was interesting. Another friend told me that she was driving in Washington, D.C., and suddenly her brakes failed. She put her foot on the brake, and it went to the floor. The emergency brake didn't work. She was in heavy traffic and a heavy business district. So she had the option of smashing into cars or smashing into people. And she suddenly heard an inner voice say, make a quick right, which she did. And she smashed into a wall in an alley between two clothing stores, narrowly missed mowing down a few people. But she was okay.
Wow.
Her car was totaled, but she was okay. And on the way home in a taxi, she decided that she wouldn't tell her mother because her mother was always scared that she was going to get in an accident. And as she walked in the door, the phone was ringing. She picked it up, and it was her mother. And her mother said, what happened to your car? And she said, how did you know? And she said, well, I don't know. It's just those words just came out of my mouth. So it does operate most strongly with the people that we're close to, especially when there's some sort of emergency, some sort of heavy emotional experience.
I had an interesting encounter which blew my mind. I was working in a computer lab at Penn State University, and the students were coming in. This is back in the early 90s, around 1990, 91. And students were coming in to register to take their tests, online tests. And as I was registering a bunch of people, this young man came, and I heard everything he was thinking. So we're having this normal conversation, like, sign here, da-da-da, and he's thinking all these really strange, actually he was attracted to me and this and that. Now I was, I'm in business mode. I'm not thinking anything, and I'm trying to ignore it. And I kept looking up at him, like, because it kept coming to me. And I've never had anybody explain that to me, like how there was no connection with this person, and I never saw him again afterwards. But I said, what is going on? Was this like some kind of bleed through by accident or something? And I never let on that I knew what he was thinking. I just kept a straight face. And but as soon as he left, I went over to my coworker and I said, did you get anything from that? And so she didn't. So it was totally like something projected into my mind about what this guy was thinking. And then another episode was I had a boyfriend and we were having a fight. We went home and we didn't clear it. And that night we were talking to each other all night long. And I woke up to the phone ringing and he's finishing the conversation that we had all night long. And by that point we're going, yeah, I'm sorry. I understand. So I've had weird things like that all my life, so I just wonder if that's something
that's very
else's
interesting.
Experience.
That's very interesting. Well, you're unusually open, I would say. It said that in each lifetime we come in sort of at the point we left off in our last life. So we come in with the gifts and abilities that we have developed in the past. So it sounds to me like you have this natural affinity and ability, and it's something that must have been cultivated and developed over time.
Well,
over
I don't
past lives.
brag about it or try to monetize it. I don't say, I'm going to read your poem. It's just, so people go, you're psychic. I go, yeah. And I said, but I'm not going to tell your fortune. It's just, I've kind of been low-key about it all. I feel blessed that I have it, and, but I would never capitalize on it, do anything about it more than, I'm very cautious even what I share, because I don't want to tell somebody something that they don't want to hear. And what happened when my parents died, my mother died. My sister they thought she was going to die, and she just wouldn't die. So she said, I'm going to go get something to eat. I've been here for days. And I was in Maui, where I live, and she was in Pennsylvania. And so as soon as she gets to the car, they said she's dead. So she comes back up, and she gets to the entry of the door. She sees my mother across the room, and she's had just died. Her mouth is open and all that stuff. And as she's just getting in the door, my mother comes and says right in her ear, very loud, Louise, like right in her ear. And at the same time, my brother is walking down the flight of steps, and the light switch right by his face, it's one of those levers that goes up and down, kind of like a lever, and he sees it go down and up, and he goes, Mom just died. So here's Janet, the psychic one. It's like, she didn't come to me. It's like they both got it, and they called me. But my husband said, don't worry, they stick around for about 3 days. So I'm sleeping. I get a lot of this stuff in the dreams. So she comes and gets me astrally, and she takes me back to the house where I was raised. And my sister still owns the house. But at that point, she had closed up the house. It's an old, drafty 1840s Pennsylvania farmhouse, and she had them in an apartment where she could keep it warmer because they were both old, and she wanted to keep them alive as long as possible. So she shows me that the portal, she had been holding over to open this portal. But as a child, all these ghosts would come through into this house, and it drove me crazy. And she said, look, I took them with me. They won't be bothering you anymore. So she showed me all this stuff, and then she brought me back. Oh, she took me to the front door, and she said, okay, we've been talking long enough. You've got to go because there's something else bringing you into that other dimension. It was taking my energy too high. So she like tossed me out the door, right through the door, poof, back into my body. And I go, Mom, talk to me. And then my dad came to me, and he's playing a guitar, like a country western singer, and he never did anything like that. And he had a very detailed song he was singing, and he says, I just wanted you to show you that we can do anything we want, include playing a guitar when we never, knew how to do it before. And he's the one that gave me my first guitar. So I've had so much contact, it actually blows my mind. But this is a fascinating subject that you're covering, and I'm really excited that you're here talking about this. So
I was really fascinated by it, too. I mean, I just couldn't stop studying it. And as I said, I was sort of mulled over how to best present it. And one thing that I noticed in reading all these esoteric books is that references to other traditions come up all the time. And so I started to study world religions and really came to understand that this is a core teaching that exists at the mystical core of all traditions. And so I kind of presented it that way as a universal teaching and showed the ways that it's explained and taught in many different spiritual traditions and cultures. It was interesting to also research the indigenous cultures because they have, really obvious parallels to what you can read in an esoteric book.
Yes. We have like 5 minutes left. Karen, do you have a question or comment?
Well, just making sure that we get information from this lady about her work that she's doing and where people can find out, because I know when I was in super seeker mode, I would love to have run into this stuff because I just kind of white-knuckled it through and got what I could on the Internet. But I feel like some kind of systematic thing would help a lot of people when they're going through these learning phases and getting downloads and they don't exactly know what they're dealing with, or they just have a lot of curiosity because once somebody knows that I've got this going on, I get a lot of questions I can't even answer. So especially the starting point, because mine was kind of a little different than the way other people kind of go about it. So this has been great conversation. I'm really eager to find out about where people can get more information.
Sure. My website is spiritualtelepathy.net. And they can read the introduction to my book, and there's many links throughout the site to order it on Amazon. And the book is very step-by-step. There's actually 12 meditations and 2 additional practices, and that's another thing that I wanted to do is to make it really easy for people because the subject is often presented just in theory. I wanted it to be very how-to. I have stories of people who have been involved with these teachings for a long time and shows the ways that it has changed their lives. It's really made a huge difference in my life. At the end of these meditations, we ask that soul light pour down over our lower bodies. And what I found is that it really kind of speeds up our vibration and I think really speeds up our evolution. It's sort of a subtle energetic process that happens, but it's really made a huge difference in my life. My heart's a lot more open. I have a lot more peace and joy in my life, so it's been very important to me. I think it's a very life-changing kind of practice.
Well, thank you so much. Are there any final words? We have like 2 minutes left and we'll play the outro. Anything else you want to tell our listeners before we sign off?
Well, this is one thing that I found very interesting, and it's hard to talk about just in a couple minutes, but what I've discovered is that from doing a lot of research is that the experience that we call genius really is this experience of connecting with the soul and through the soul having contact with the universal mind where all information, past, present, and future is. And so there's a lot of stories in the book about many of the people, artists, writers, composers, scientists, who have had this experience and talked about it in exactly the way it's explained in the wisdom teachings. So I think people would find that fascinating. I certainly did.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, Colleen, for coming on our show, and encourage everybody to go get her book and read it. It sounds fascinating. So thank you very much. Karen, thank you for joining us today as my co-host. I really appreciate your wisdom and insights. So much love and blessings, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Aloha. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.